Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank all participants for joining this webinar with the title of IEEE PES Malaysia Research Discourse 2021. This webinar is broadcasted live on IEEE PES Malaysia YouTube channel and Facebook platform. This webinar is organized by IEEE Power and Energy Society PES Malaysia. I am Ashikin from IEEE University Technology Mara UITM student branch, and I will be the moderator for this session. Today is the fourth and will be the last session for the IEEE PES Malaysia Research Discourse 2021 series. For today, we are honored to have two speakers, Associate Professor IR Dr. Nurajda Salim and Technologist Dr. Kanendra Naidu to share their research experience. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Technologist Dr. Kanendra Naidu received his master's and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from the University of Malaya in 2011 and 2015, respectively. He has served various universities before joining University Technology Mara (UiTM) in 2021 as senior lecturer with the School of Electrical Engineering. He is a professional technologist registered under the Malaysian Board of Technologies, a member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineer (IEEE), a member of the Institution of Engineers Malaysia (IEM), and a member of Malaysian Energy Professional Association (MEPA). He has authored multiple ISI and Scopus Index journals and actively served as speaker for various international and national platforms. His research interests includes electrical engineering specializing in the implementation of artificial intelligence in power systems. He also has strong working experience in a variety of evolutionary and swarm-based optimization techniques, graph theory, wavelet transform, and artificial neural networks. He also served an active reviewer with various international journals. With that introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Kanendra Naidu to deliver his presentation. Dr. Kanendra Naidu, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Ashikin. Thank you for the very generous and kind introduction. Right. So, good morning to everyone. And let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, a very good morning again. So, for today, which will be the fourth session of the IEEE PES Malaysia Research Discourse, I'll be presenting my presentation on my research topic, which is basically on load frequency control, the intelligent approaches that is used for this particular topic, and how do we achieve optimum performance. So, going through my presentation outline, I will go through the introduction. How do we tune the controller, the LFC, the methodology in this research, some further work and summary of this particular research. So before that, just to introduce myself. So my name is Kanendra. Currently, I'm the lecturer with the School of Electrical Engineering, UiTM Salim. So my research interest is on evolutionary and swarm-based optimization techniques, graph theory, wavelet transform, and artificial neural network. And the area which I'm actively researching on is on intentional islanding, or they also used to call it intentional control islanding, load frequency control, network reconfiguration, techno-economical analysis of RE integration. So these are the areas which I'm actively researching on, and A brief intro about myself. So before this, my research career started with UCSI University, in which I served as the academic staff, and then continued my master's and PhD with University of Malaya. And I was also serving with UniKL BMI. So I will begin my research presentation. So as we all know that the power system is an integrated connection of a variety of components, namely the generation, transmission, and distribution. And this operation of this interconnected system is to address the load demand. So basically, we're going to generate and supply energy to the customers. But the issue here is that, as we all know, the demand of the electricity is very dynamic. It is volatile, it changes. And the dynamic nature of the system makes us focus to develop control strategies that are able to address all this volatility, right? So whenever things changes, we have to address accordingly. So what you can see here in this diagram is, we call these areas. So when you have multiple areas interconnected, then we have the whole grid. So if we go back into Peninsular Malaysia itself, or TNB, so they have divided into multiple areas, and you have the northern system, western system, and central system, and so on, right? So they have areas. And when we look at the load demand, you can see that it changes. It changes by second, it changes by minute, it can change by hour. So it depends on how are we analyzing the system. Two of the most important parameters, say very important parameters, apart from the others, are the system frequency and voltage. So this system frequency and voltage has to be maintained at their scheduled values. But today we are going to talk about specifically the frequency. And as I was mentioning earlier on, we are trying to generate, and then we are trying to appease the load demand. So in order to do that, we need to have a point of equilibrium. So that is what is called the load generation balance. So whatever the load requires, the generation have to provide in order to make sure that they are equal. The moment when we have inequality in this system, then there tends to be some issues with the network. Right? And each country, they have their own grid code. Based on their own frequency, you have the 50 hertz and 60 hertz system. And if you were to go through the grid code, for Malaysia, you can actually refer to Energy Commission's grid code, which is available. They have given guidelines on how the frequency range should be, right? So 49.5 to 50.5 hertz. And they have exceptional circumstances. So there's a table where they actually tell you what are the circumstances where certain exceptions could be made. The other thing is, when we maintain the system, we want to see less deviation in frequency and tie line power. So when we go back to the system, you have one area to another area. So when power transmits from one area to another area, that is through the tie line power. And when this happens is during load demand. So let's say, for example, suddenly there is a sudden increase in load demand, so the generator has to meet the load demand. So in this research, we call it step load perturbation, because we perturb or we disturb the system. The system is in balance and we disturb the system. So this is a basic or a typical overview of synchronous generator. Reason why being synchronous generator is because most of the plants, the power plants, are using synchronous generator. Of course, with current technology, you have DFIG with wind turbines and so on. Right. So what you can see here with the block in green, that is your load frequency control. So whenever it senses that the frequency is different due to a load demand, so this will send a signal to the load frequency control, and this controller has to control or manipulate the valve to increase the speed or decrease the speed. Right. So when there is a load demand, we need to increase the speed, increase the frequency to meet the load demand. And when there is a drop in load, so we try to reduce. And similarly, you have a voltage sensor. and you have an AVR. We call it an AVR, an automatic voltage regulator, and you have an excitation system. So this excitation system is for the DC excitation, and then you are able to increase or decrease the voltage, right? So when we talk about frequency, we are talking about the active power control, and when we are talking about voltage, we are talking about the reactive power control. So they are interlinked. So we have different type of frequency response. So as you can see from the diagram, we have the primary frequency response, secondary, and the tertiary response. So when we look into the primary response, we are essentially talking about the initial response. So each system will have their own inertia. So this inertia is based on the kinetic energy of the rotating system, because the generators are rotating machines. So they will tend to address any step load perturbation or SLPs. But this is less than 10 seconds. So further than that, the secondary controller kicks in, which is the governor response, and then the load frequency control, or LFC, will play its role to try to bring back the system to nominal condition, or the reference voltage. That is being done by the LFC, and AVL will do it for the voltage. And when we go to tertiary control, so tertiary control is more than that, okay, more than the 30 seconds limit. We are talking about generation dispatch, redispatch generation. So this can be seen in post-islanding operation. So when you island the system, when you carry out ICI, you are able to see that certain islands will have load reach or generation reach. So they have to redispatch the generation. And how do we actually carry out this study? So in order for us to carry out this study, we need to do, we have to model the system, right, to reciprocate the operation of the generator and the whole power system. So there are a couple of methods. One of it is using transfer function modeling, which is based on Laplace transform. One is using state variables. So what we tend to do is that we take the time response, or the Laplace transform, of each of these elements in power system, and then we model it as a control system. So once we have modeled it as a control system, it's easier for us to analyze. So some of them are using state variables. So when you use state variables, basically you are breaking them down to their state space equation, right? So over here in this research, we are more focused on the transfer function modeling, and you have to identify how many areas you have single areas, single area, two areas, three area, four area, or even more, right? And what are the generation sources? So we have thermal system, we have hydro system, we have renewable energy resources, wind, solar, and so on. And when we model the system, what are the non-linearity and physical constraints of the system? Obviously, there are certain things in practical that happens that if we, in our particular model, if we do not consider, we might not get a very accurate representation. So we try to model as much as possible the physical constraints. And once we have done that, the final thing is for us to identify the controller we want to use. So over here you can see when you have a transfer function model, we need to identify the areas, the generating units, the constraints, and what are the controller type. So people have used PID. PID is commonly used. Then you have fractional order PID, a fuzzy system, neural network, and so on. So in order for us to tune the controller, this controller takes in error as your input, and then we compensate for the error that is happening in the system, right? So what is this error called in LFC? In LFC, we call them area control error. So the area control error is a combination of aggregation of the tie line power and the frequency bias. So aggregation of this will give us the area control error. So as you can see, these are the area control errors. This is a two-area system. And these are the controllers, okay, controller 1 and controller 2. And those are the generating units in the system. And those are the step load perturbation and the tie line power. So this is how we model the system using Laplace transform. And in a certain area, we can have multiple generating units. It is not confined to one generating unit. We can have multiple generating units. So over here you can see a three area system with three generators in each area. And those are the distribution companies and the Genco generation company, and they are connected to the uh, transmission system operator. So you can have hydro units, you can have reheat thermal units. You can also have solar PV. You can also have a thermal system with no reheat. And you can also have a diesel system, wind turbine, battery storage system as well. Right? So it depends on how you want to model the system. What is the objective of LFC? We want to achieve zero steady state error for frequency deviation. So zero steady state error means before disturbance, before perturbation is 50 hertz. During perturbation, there will be some frequency deviation. Then once the controller steps in, goes back to 50 hertz. So no deviation. And we want the tie line power flow, the unscheduled tie line power flow to be minimum. And we want to have an acceptable value of overshoot and steady settling time for frequency deviation and the tie line power deviation. So these are the three main objectives. Right? So it is our main concern is to try to improve the performance of this load frequency control when we are subjected to this kind of changes or disturbance in the system, which we call as SLP. So there are many methods which is being done in this particular research. So people have used classical methods or adaptive controller or robust approach or digital approach. The approach that we are actually using here is the intelligent approach. Right? So the intelligent approach are not only limited to this, but these are the common intelligent approach. So some people want to go ahead with neural network. You can do that. You have fuzzy logic optimization. So what I would like to mention here is that each of these technique has its advantages and disadvantages. Right? The neural network, as we all know, has now moved forward to even deep neural network or deep learning, convolutional neural network, and so on. So you need to have good enough data set to train your controller. Fuzzy logic is very good because it can give you very good response online. But you need to have heuristic, means you need to be able to come up with tuning parameters. So you have to tune the controller first based on experience. And the optimization is chosen because of its flexibility. So optimization is an iterative process, right? It's an iterative process. So we call it adaptive tuning, right? So the parameters of the controller, we tune it to accommodate the changes in the system. And this adaptive tuning works for PI controller, PD controller, PID, fractional order PID. There's also PI squared D, means two integral operators. So variety of controllers that could be used. And here you can see the basic control system, PID control system, or PID transfer function, which is based on the area control error. Right? So the area control error is the error in the LFC system. And you can see we use optimization to tune the controller parameters. So the AC is the input to the controller, the error value, and the controller output or the compensator's output will provide compensating signal to the plant. Uh, 4-bit controller or fractional order PID controller has been gaining momentum in this research, in this area. More and more research is coming up in this area where they are using this fractional order PID controller. So the PID controller is the common controller, and in fractional order PID, they are actually based on PID controller. The only difference is that they have the lambda and mu parameter. So this lambda and mu parameter could be fraction. It could be fraction. So you can actually put in these values. So you have 5 parameters to control, and some preliminary research that we have conducted, and we found that this controller is quite effective compared to PID. So this controller, perhaps in the last 2 years, has been gaining momentum. So this is one area to be looked at. And when we talk about error, these are the objective function to optimize the parameter. So sometimes we call it objective function, sometimes we can also call it performance index. So when we say performance index in LFC, we are talking about the least amount of error between the reference and compensated value. And the common criteria that we use is IAE, ISE, ITAE, and ITSE. So these terms are actually very common in control system. They are actually called integral absolute error, integral squared error. The T represents the time multiplier. Right? So these error signal or the error values represent a certain thing. So as you can see from the diagram at the bottom here, on the bottom left-hand side, you can actually see that when you sum up the error at each time step, so basically you're going to get an error which is going to saturate at some point. If your error doesn't saturate, that means your system haven't compensated and you haven't come back to the reference value. So it will just shoot up like a linear line. So we do not want that. So we want it to saturate. But what we want is for it to saturate as fast as possible. So when it saturates, that means there is minimal error or negligible error. Right? So that's what we want. So when in this study, when we want to use this criteria as our performance index, some of it, like for example ISE, if we use ISE, we want it can give you smaller overshoot but longer settling time. Or if you use IAE, give you larger overshoot but shorter settling time. Right? So it's always a trade-off between these parameters. If you think that these parameters are not applicable, we can also move forward to formulate our own index based on the frequency overshoot and the settling time. Right? So we just need to evaluate these values. Right? And this is how we can use this function. So basically, when they say it's an integration from 0 to t, so from starting when your system starts right up to a certain amount of time, right? So when you integrate, you are basically summing up all the values based on a certain time step, right? And when you put a t there, you multiply the time multiplier. Right? So in this research area, we actually try to investigate. Okay, I actually try to investigate what happens if we do two objective functions. What is the advantages and disadvantages, and what is the impact of physical constraint? So, what are the constraints that are available, and how can we overcome it? And which is the best optimization technique? Right. So, when we look at the research methodology over here, let's say if we were to consider two different criteria for us to optimize the controller. So assume that this is a two area system, a reheat thermal system. And you can see that there are two controllers, right? Controller 1 and controller 2. These are PID controllers. And then we take the error. So in each area, the error would be different based on the system parameters and also the load demand in each area. So what we tried to do was we tried to achieve two objectives, which is ITAE and ITSE. And we try to use ABC. ABC is a swarm optimization technique. It is called artificial bee colony. So it is based on the bee movement in order to obtain food source. So the ABC, it has two characteristics. One is to explore and one is to exploit, right? So they have their own phases. They have their employed bee, onlooker bee, and scout bee. And what they actually do is they try to look at the source. And then there is one bee, which is called the scout bee, which is based on a random movement, which tries to explore further. Because in most of this optimization technique, we get stuck in the local minima. So you can So when we have a colony size, these are our PID parameters, and these bees will go into this search space and try to exploit the current parameters to see which is the best parameter. But sometimes they get stuck, and this is where the scout bee phase comes in, and they go to a random food source, which could sometimes lead to better results. And this is how the optimization works to find the PID parameters to tune the controller for load frequency control. And for multi-objective function formulation, so what we have done is we have used weighted sum. So basically, we're going to attach one weight to one function, another weight to another function, right? And for example, objective one is ITAE, objective two is ITSE. So, and how does the weight perform? So you have 1 to 0. So if W1 is 0.1, W2 is 0.9. So when you add them up, it becomes 1. So you can actually do that. So we have actually done that. And what we found out is that when you have two different objectives, your values will be different. So you have to do some sort of normalization to uh, bring it into the normal range. Normalization, you can use min max normalization. There are many normalizations. So to get it in between 0 to 1. And when we use min max normalization, so we are able to get a single answer, a single objective. So we are effectively turning a multi objective problem into a single objective problem. And so we choose the best weightage. So we have determined from various weightage set that we have analyzed. And then what is the best weight? Is it 0.3, 0.7, 0.2, 0.8, and so on? And then I've developed an index which is called least average error. Because when you have a set of answers, these answers could all be accurate, right? So these answers could all be accurate, but it is depending on what we want, which are the best weightage we want. For example, we want 50% of objective one and 50% of objective two, or we want 80% of objective one and 20% of objective two, right? And then we develop a index, a performance index, right? And on top of only looking into that, we also look into what we call as our overshoot and settling time. So the overshoot and settling time are also important parameters that we have to look at, because we want to have minimal overshoot and faster settling time. But again, as I mentioned, it's a trade-off, right? You will not get both, but we have to focus on one. But with double objective or multi-objective, we try to get at least some sort of best between the both worlds. Right, so we have investigated by applying step load perturbation in one area, and then we have also investigated cases by putting in both areas. We try to disturb both areas, and we try to vary the system parameters. So by doing so, we are able to determine which is the highest performance index, which was at 0.2 and 0.8, which was far apart from what we initially thought it would be, right? So when we apply this index, so we are able to identify which is the best weightage set, whether it is in both areas, or you vary the load demand, or there is varying system parameters. And what we can actually see here is that we have actually compared to conventional PI and PID controller, and we found out that the ABC weighted sum ABC method of tuning the controller parameters gives us very good performance. The advantages that it's easy to implement, it's less complex, because we are effectively converting from multi-objective to a single objective, right? Of course, there is a little bit of normalization involved, but it's just programming. However, the I would say things that to look at, or where this is lacking, is what is the best weightage set? Because what we have done, we have just went with 0.1, 0.9, and so on. It could be 0.15, it could be 0.18, and so on. And when you treat it as a single objective, we tend to lose some information, right? Accuracy, I would say. So the further work was implementing Pareto optimal optimization technique. You have the non-dominated sorting of genetic algorithm, and so on. The expert system, Pareto optimal expert system, right? So these kind of techniques will be able to further enhance a multi-objective problem. Right. So the other issue with in this research area is what are the physical constraints? So why are the physical constraints important? So obviously, when we deal with engineering system, we tend to take, okay, this is an ideal case, uh, generation, supply, meet the load demand, and you're done. But we need to incorporate this system limitation. So in this generator study on this LFC, some of the important system limitation or constraints are generation rate constraint, time delay, governor deadband, and boiler dynamics. And we also found that noise in the system can impede the controller's efficiency. So what happens is that this high frequency noise will subject the controller to react to all the changes. So they have used low pass filter to reject this high frequency noise, right? But we found that it can be further improved, right? And also there was another algorithm which is called Firefly algorithm, which actually gives quite a good tuning performance compared to the commonly used particle swarm optimization. So we tried to investigate this to find out how does it actually work, right? So when we talk about system limitation, so when we talk about generation rate constraint, what is the rate that the generator is able to produce? Ideally, we would say, okay, it's limitless, but in reality, it is limited by its physical and mechanical limitation. So we have a percentage 3 to 10%, depending on the generator. And governor deadband. So there are certain positions for the valve where the governor doesn't actually reacts to the changes in speed. And also the boiler dynamics. So you have a boiler in the system, and time delay. Sometimes there will be delay uh, in propagating the information to the controller. Right? So they have delay up to 2 seconds, right? And the high frequency noise to investigate the controller reaction. Right? So these are the limitations that we have considered in our research, and see how actually the generator is able to perform. Right. So as I mentioned earlier, this high frequency noise low pass filter is commonly used, but we have actually investigated something called wavelet transform. So wavelet transform is multi resolution analysis, and it is actually very good in denoising a signal, right, without losing signal integrity. Okay, because sometimes the problem with filters is you need to identify the optimal parameters, and then sometimes you use the signal integrity, you lose some important information in the signal. So there is uh, the normal continuous wavelet transform and discrete wavelet transform. And we actually study the wavelets to obtain the timescale representation. So we actually decompose the signal into high frequency and low frequency. Right. So when you have the signal, you have your wavelet transform. We do thresholding to remove or denoise, and then we do IW2 inverse wavelet transform, and then we reconstruct back the signal. So these are the phases and the levels of decomposition that there is. Right. So we have actually expanded the model. We have done on a 3-area model with single generating unit in each area, and it's a reheat thermal model. And we have incorporated all the system limitation, whether it is time delay, the noise, the dead zone, the boiler dynamics, GRC, and so on. And we actually saw that when you incorporate more and more system imperfection, I would call it imperfection or system limitation, it's become more challenging because your controller has to be able to um, settle or try to produce less frequency and tie line power deviation. So tuning the controller becomes quite a challenge, right? So these are the system limitation, right? Um, so when we try to integrate, so we try to do an online wavelet filter, right, for this LFC, and we have chosen 3 level of decomposition. Um, Now, when we come to wavelet, the issue that we have is how many level of decomposition that we want to do. Do we want to do 1, 2, 3? It can go up to 5, 6, 7. And also, what is the wavelet type that you want to use? Right. So Uh, After investigation, three level of decomposition is good enough for this research area. And as we increase the level of decomposition, we tend to lose the important parts of the signal. Right. So we have done three level of decomposition, and we also try to see which wavelet family gives the best denoising property. Right. And over here, we try to use the Firefly algorithm. And in Firefly algorithm, we are using the objective function, which is the light intensity. It represents the objective function. And the distance between fireflies are based on the distance between one firefly to another. And then we actually study the movement of the fireflies, and then we optimize the PID based on ITSA, right? So this ITSA is able to get the objective that we require in order to tune our PID controller. So we have actually formed a signal integrity index. So in this signal integrity index, we are able to see the sum of the noise and the mean signal of the noise, right? Or the mean of the noise. And then we try to do various different scenarios to see how does the wavelet function. And upon investigating, we actually found out that the Firefly algorithm are able to give us consistent global minimum compared to PSO. Right. And when we try to integrate and compare with the low pass filter, we are able to find out that the wavelet filter actually gives us the best signal integrity and best denoise signal. Right. So we have developed an index to actually test this. And we have introduced noise, and we also tried to vary the wavelet families, and we found out that for this investigation that coiflet, which is one of the wavelet family, coiflet 1, because you have coiflet 1, coiflet 3, 5, and so on. So it managed to give us the best signal integrity compared to the other wavelets. So with this, we can able to not only optimally tune the controller, but we also are able to denoise the noise or denoise the signal in order for us to get the optimum system performance. And the third phase of our investigation was actually to investigate the various optimization techniques that are available. And as we can see from literature, there are basically thousands of optimization techniques. So we try to go with the ones that actually solve, or which is able to uh, how do you say, overcome the issues that we are trying to solve in our problem, which is based on our application. And these optimization techniques are called meta heuristic techniques. So I've done actually a simple categorization. Obviously, the categories are that it's even more extensive, right? So basically, we have nature inspired, and then we have a physics based algorithm. Even in nature inspired, you actually have evolutionary algorithm, which are genetic algorithm, EP, evolutionary programming, and ICA. And in swarm technique, you have PSO, ABC, Firefly, Cuckoo search. And then I think there is also further categorization. There is insect-based optimization, grasshopper, moth. All these optimization techniques are actually inspired by these biologists, and they are inspired by nature. And the objective here is to find the best or the optimum solution. We want to find the optimum solution. So the movement and so on is all converted to mathematics, and we are using that for our controller. And in physics-based algorithms, we have gravity search and electromechanism like algorithm, and also we have the central force optimization algorithm. So these are algorithm based on the physics equation. So we also try to investigate in this area, and then we try to compare evolutionary algorithm with genetic algorithm, GSA, particle swarm optimization. And what we did here is when we optimize the controllers, we tend to compare between other optimization. But what happens if we compare with exhaustive search? Exhaustive search is time consuming because you want to go through all the possible combination that there is. So in a three area power system, so we have a three area power system, and in each area we have three generators, okay, three different generators with different system parameters. So we actually saw that if we were to do an exhaustive search, we have 1.9 times 10 to the power of 38. That is the number of combination that we need to test. So that is very time consuming. So we develop a method, interval halving method, to reduce the processing time, and then we try to identify the best answer. Obviously, if you use exhaustive search, you are going to find the optimum answer. But the next step is for us to see whether this optimization techniques answer, does it match with the optimum answer that you get from exhaustive search. Exhaustive search obviously is limited by system processing resources and so on, right? So I think in both cases we are able to find that the ABC algorithm is able to tune the multi-area system, and it is able to exploit and explore to find the best controller parameters. So this further proves that in different case studies that you have in your research area, we have to identify the best optimization technique that could be used. There is no one single optimization technique that is best for all the application. They can solve the problem, but what we need to identify is whether do they relate to that particular problem that we are trying to solve. So how do we determine this? So we have to do analysis, and we have to run a couple of experiments, and then we find out which is the best technique for that particular problem. So on top of that, we have further extended and we have done further work on this load frequency control, and we have actually implemented in ICI, intentional control islanding. So in ICI, problem is when you have a grid, your power grid, and then there is risk of blackout due to cascading failure. So when you have cascading failure, you have to actually split. So we call it a network splitting problem. So we have actually split the network into, let's say, for example, in this particular study, we have divided into 4 areas. So when you divide into 4 areas, so you're going to have 4 islands. And when you have 4 islands, what happens is that each island will have to redispatch its generation. And then when it redispatch generation, because there is going to be changes in the generation and load balance, you have to tune back the controller. So how do you do that? So based on the study, we have actually used weighted sum ABC. And when you have noise in the system, and in these cases, we found out that the simulate wavelet is actually very good to denoise the signal, and we are able to tune the parameters. And in this example, the optimization proves to be quite useful because it becomes a different system from the original system when you island the system. Right? So we have actually implemented this, and we are able to settle the system quite well. And also work on hardware integration. So this is one of the work which I was involved in. And we actually try to, the next phase of the research is to actually implement or integrate it in hardware. So this voltage-oriented control, which is based on VNR rectifier for EV charging stations. So what we actually did is we did the system modeling, in which we actually took the transfer function. We developed the transfer function of the system. And once you have the system, we tune the controller based on ITAE, ITSE, IAE, or AIC. So in our case, we use ITAE. And so once we have tuned the controller, we can actually implement that particular controller values for that experiment. So currently what we are doing is we are modeling the system, because there are a lot of physical constraints in the system, and then we are trying to optimize the system offline before we integrate it into the hardware. So this is the further work and how we actually use optimization in real world application or hardware integration. So in my study, what I've done in or how optimization has been used is I have used optimization for fault location, in which I have optimized the hyperparameters of ANN to detect more accurately where the fault location and the fault distance is. This optimization technique is able to be used in network splitting and also network restoration. So when you restore the network, we have done it for electrical vehicles, network reconfiguration, and also for islanding detection. So we have used optimization to tune the ANN hyperparameters, and we are able to detect the islanding scenario more accurately. And also RE integration. Two other engineering domains that we have actually used optimization is in rehab robot controller. So when you have a rehab robot or rehabilitation robot for stroke patients, uh, you're going to have motors which is able to move according to the set of exercises that the stroke patient has to do. So why optimization is important in this area is because it is not just about optimizing the parameters, but we want to make sure that you do not have uh, very fast response because it could injure the patient. So we can actually optimization is flexible, so we can customize the objective function to fit the nature of that particular problem. And also we have used optimization to optimize the antenna design for loop antennas. So the current work that we are actually doing is we are using optimization for virtual power plant integration for frequency ancillary services. And also we are optimizing the BNR rectifier for EV. And we are currently looking at insect-based optimization for load frequency controller study. Right, so this is the current work that we are actually doing. So in summary, I would say that the optimization techniques have provided a method for us to optimally tune the controller parameters. So what is important here that it provides flexibility to customize the whole process. So in this case, in load frequency control, we are able to customize it to be applicable. And in load frequency control problem, the physical constraints, they pose a challenge. So we need to identify what is the proper tuning technique. And the optimization selection, which technique is also important. And it depends on the objective of our investigation. So even in LFC, you have multi-area, single area, or multiple generators. So you have to analyze the problem and then determine which is the best optimization technique to be used. Right. So with that being said, I think that's all for my presentation. So thank you. Thanks.
Participants who wish to ask question, please post it in the chat box. We will conduct the Q&A session after the second speaker has presented. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a quick break before we proceed with the second speaker. The organizing committee is honored to have the current IEEE PES Malaysia chapter chair with us today. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor IR Dr. Hazli Moklis to share some information on IEEE PES Malaysia. Prof. Hazli, to you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. Let me share my slide. How to share? Oh, share. Okay. Share screen. Can you see the slide?
Not yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, need to share. Okay, share. Now, can you see the slide?
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes, I can see the slide.
Okay. So, do my voice clear?
Yes, clear.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, again, Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our event today, the research discourse. So I would like to take this opportunity to do a little bit introduction about IEEE PES. Yeah. I will do quick one. Okay. So basically, what is IEEE PES and also who we are and where we are going. Yeah. So basically, IEEE PES is under the umbrella of IEEE. It is the second largest society under the IEEE umbrella, and we have around more than 38,000 members around the world. And for Malaysia, we have around 300 members, including the senior member, postgraduate student, undergraduate student. So this is the mission of IEEE PES Malaysia, PES, to be the leading provider of scientific and engineering information on electric power and energy for the betterment of society and the preferred professional development source for our members. So the focus, if you can see here, is on the electric power and energy. So as a members, I would like to invite everybody who is not a IEEE PES member to be a member so that you can gain the benefits. For example, you can maintain and improve the technical expertise, have a networking with a professional around the world in the area of power and energy, and you have the opportunity to contribute for the future of power and energy. It can be as a speakers, it can be committee members in certain event, and of course, as a member, you can have some discount or free event you can attend, which organized by IEEE PES. So under IEEE PES, there are a lot of resources. There are a lot of resources, and as a member, you have the opportunity to browse through the tutorial, video, technical report, journal article, and others. IEEE PES Malaysia is under Region 10. You can see on the right side, consists of 45 chapters. So this is the orange one. So Malaysia is together with Australia, Singapore, India, and China. So this is large area. In Malaysia, IEEE PES Malaysia started in 1994. This is the list of the previous chapter chairs. You can, maybe some of the photo here you are familiar. Prof Azhar, okay, you can see Prof Fauzi, Prof Zuhaina. Some of the chapter chair also from industry. For example, Mike is from industry, Dr. Zaharul from industry, Mr. Yu also from industry. For the current one, myself, Hazli, I'm the chapter chair past 2 years. So what we did as a chapter chair in Malaysia, we have lectures, we conduct conferences. There's an award also. I mean, you can apply for the award as a member. There's an outstanding engineer award, less than 15 years, more than 15 years. So there are a lot of opportunity. And then we have industry linkages, industry visit. We can forum with industry. And we also have an award for final year project related to power and energy. And we have activities like reaching out to members. For example, last year we sent a lot of face masks to our members due to the MCO, and we have a senior member drive. This is example of the activities that we did this year. At the moment now, there is a briefing about the electrical power system competition. We call it EPSCOM. This is the second year. We organized this EPSCOM, and the idea is to provide the added value to the undergraduate student so that once they're going for the industrial work, they have some knowledge, especially in the power system area. So you can see the price is quite good, 3,000, 1,500. And we have organized one social activity this year, get together, high tea. Okay, this is not during the MCO, when they are given some allowance for some events. We did that, we managed to do that. And we have the senior membership evaluation workshop around next week. Next week. And this is the outstanding engineer award. Okay. So far Malaysia chapter has a good track record. Recently we won the Outstanding Chapter Award last year for 2020. This is for the world, not only for Region 10 or Malaysia, but we are number one in the world. And because of that, we have entrusted to organize two big conference next year, PowerCon and PCon. And we have won the first position for the high performance chapter program in the world for under IEEE PES. And we also gain some grants from Region 10 for social activities. Yeah. So I would like to invite everyone to be a members. For those not a member, please you can apply to be a members. For lecturer, one of the good thing to be a member is that you have the opportunity to be visible. For example, we can invite you to give a talk. This is good visibility approach, and you can be committee members in certain of the specific events, for example, EPSCON. So you can gain a lot of leadership experience to be said in specific, beside the networking. So in order to be a member, you need to be a IEEE member and at the same time apply for members. And there's also some special discount for student members. So if you want to have more information about PES, you can go to this website, IEEE PES Malaysia. There are a lot of information that you can find out. And in the website also, we provide the list of our members with their CV. So you can, if you want to do networking, you can contact them. All right. So I think that's all from me. Thank you very much. And I hope everyone can be IEEE members. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Hazli, for the informative sharing about IEEE PES Malaysia. I hope participants who have yet to become the IEEE PES member do join us now as more attractive programs await. Next, I would like to introduce our second speaker. Associate Professor IR Dr. Nur Ashida Salim is from the School of Electrical Engineering, formerly known as the Faculty of Electrical Engineering, College of Engineering, University Technology Mara, UiTM Shah Alam. She will be giving a talk on reliability assessment by sensitivity analysis due to electrical power, sequential tripping for energy sustainability. Associate Professor IR Dr. Nur Rashida Salim received her PhD in Electrical Engineering from University Technology Mara in 2015, Master in Engineering, Power System and Electrical Energy from University of Malaya in 2006, and Bachelor in Electrical Engineering Honours from University Technology Mara in 2003. She is currently an Associate Professor at the School of Electrical Engineering, College of Engineering, University Technology Mara, UiTM. Her research includes power system risk assessment, power system reliability, power system planning, power system stability, power system assets management, and other related areas. Throughout her career, she has secured several research grants, supervised postgraduate students, and appointed as an internal and external examiner for postgraduate students. To date, she has published more than 50 ISI and Scopus Index journal and many proceeding papers. In IEEE PES Malaysia, she is currently the vice chair for the chapter. With that introduction, I would like to invite Associate Professor IR Dr. Nur Ashida Salim to deliver her presentation. Dr. Ashida, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ashikin, for the introduction just now. All right, let me share my slide. Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning once again to thank you to our moderator Ashikin for the very kind introduction. All right, so again, I am Ashida Salim, and I'm from the School of Electrical Engineering, College of Engineering, UITM, Shah Alam. Right, so I am honored today to share a bit of my research experience on the reliability assessment and also the risk assessment of power system. All right, so basically this research was conducted during my PhD back in 2011. That was 10 years ago. All right, so basically the research that I'm going to share today is part of the PhD and also some improvement that I have worked out together with my students. All right, so just to recall back, we all know that the function of a power system is basically to transmit the energy from one point to another point, which is from the generation to the consumer. All right, so by means of transmission system, it's either overhead lines or underground cables. All right, so as a consumer on the distribution side, of course, we want our electrical energy or the supply that we receive from the generation is of high reliability. All right, so basically what motivates me to perform this, to embark into this research is basically due to this incident of power system collapse, okay? Or we can also call it in a layman term as blackout. All right, so if we can see here, I have tabulated some of the major events of cascading collapse and also its related consequences. All right, and in 2011, where at this point I started my PhD, there is a major blackout. In September 2011, one of the major blackouts happened in US, San Diego, where if we look here, 2.7 million customers were affected due to this power outage. Okay, although the collapse duration is only 11 minutes, but the time taken to restore the system back to normal took up to 12 hours. All right, so this is an eye-opener for me to embark into this risk assessment and also reliability research basically. All right, and a week after that, another blackout happened in South Korea, which affected 2.1 million, all right, of the population in South Korea. And the collapse duration is about 2 hours. Okay, and the restoration time took more than 3 hours. Okay, and another we can say major blackout in July 2012, where it happened in India. Actually, this blackout in India occurred or happened in 2 days, 30th of July and also 31st of July. All right, so the first hit was 30th of July, where 300 million of India's population were affected by this total power blackout. All right, so if you can see from this figure, this is taken from the report from the India blackout, and the collapse hit India more than 15 hours. All right, so we can imagine our life without power. So the restoration time took more than 5 hours actually. But then the system managed to restore within 5 hours, but the next day it collapsed again. All right, so it is a major hit to India at that time. And these are some of the most recent, which is 2019 blackout. And we can see that due to this blackout or power outage, this the affected population is quite big. The numbers are more than 1 million. All right, so I guess everyone can imagine what will happen to our daily life without power. All right, we will okay, some of the store closed due to no electricity, schools, the traffic, and so on. All right, so this is basically the I've started this research basically looking into these catastrophic events of power outage. All right. Okay, so this is reported by one of the publication in ResearchGate back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So these are the percentage of the power outage. Okay, as we can see here, 47%, more than 47% of the power outage is due to the equipment failure. Okay, so this is internal cost of the grid system. Okay, next is the natural disaster where we have a heavy snow, heavy rainfall, and so on. Right, 10% due to malfunctions, 5% is due to vandalism, 4.29% is due to supply shortage, and the remaining is due to cyber attack. All right, so this is also one of the main reason why it is very important to consider this research is basically we want to investigate on the equipment failure. Okay, what is actually the main contributor to this equipment failure that could results in the power outage. All right. Okay, so now we are moving into the topic of this research is basically on the cascading failure. All right, some research refers it to by using sequential tripping. All right, so by definition, a cascading failure is a process in a system of interconnected parts in which the failure of one or few parts can trigger the failure of other parts, and so on. Okay, it will cascade one after another. Right, so such a failure may happen in many types of system. For example, our power transmission, computer networking, finance, transportation system, organism, the human body itself, and also the ecosystem. All right, so the cascading failure or cascading collapse or sequential tripping may occur when one part of the system fail, and when this happens, the other parts must then compensate for the failed component. So that means the equipment or the parts connected nearest to the failure component, we have to compensate the failure of that initial component. So this is this in turn overloads these nodes, causing them to fail as well, prompting additional nodes to fail one after another. All right, so if you can see at this diagram here, initially it started with an initial component or equipment fail. All right, one equipment or one component fail, the other equipment tries to balance the system back. However, not all events will success or will balance back the system. Okay, sometimes it could make this event worse, making it the whole system to fail. Okay, so that is the basic concept of cascading failure. Right, so basically in my research, the risk assessment analysis or the risk assessment research that I'm studying is basically due to cascading failure. All right. All right, so I will explain to you the concept of this system cascading collapse. Okay, there are basically two types of system cascading collapse. The first one is static and the second one is dynamic. Okay, so I'll explain the concept for both system cascading collapse, but first I'll introduce on the static system cascading collapse. All right, so this is an example. This is not a real system. This is just to illustrate or to show you how does this static system cascading collapse can occur. All right, so this is just a fixtures system where, all right, so I have selected transmission line connected from bus 2 to bus 11 as the initial tripping line. All right, so let's say this particular line trip, okay, so the lines connected to the same bus as the line tripping will compensate the load for the tripping line. So that means at bus number 2 and also at bus number 11, all the lines connected to this particular bus is called the exposed line. Exposed line meaning that these particular lines which is connected to the initial tripping line will have the probability to trip next and subsequently to trip another line. Okay, so this is what static system cascading collapse. All right, so the red lines are all the exposed transmission lines, which are all the transmission lines connected to the same bus as the initial tripping. Okay, so we will after this we will perform the load flow study to see whether this exposed line violates their thermal limit or not. All right, so if this particular exposed lines violate the thermal limit, which is the MVA rating of that particular line, that particular exposed line will be the next line to trip. Okay, so that means the subsequent line to trip is basically based on the thermal rating of the particular line itself. All right, so let's say after performing the load flow study, right, so we have the initial line tripping just now. So out of these 1, 2, 3, 4 exposed line, okay, after we perform the load flow, it seems that line 2 to 4, okay, violates the thermal limit. That means the line flow is more than the rated line limit of that particular line. So this line will be the next line to trip. This is what we call as random tripping. So meaning that all the exposed line has probability to trip. Okay, what are the probability? How do we calculate the probability? I will explain to you later. Okay, so this is how. So now we have two transmission line tripping. Okay, the first one is line 211, which is the initial tripping. And the second one is line 24, right? So this process will continue. All right, so line 24 is the second line tripping. So we have to look all transmission lines, all lines connected to bus 2 and also bus 4, which is the line tripping buses connected. So we have additional exposed lines, and again we have to perform the load flow analysis to see the thermal limit and also the line flow, whether it violates or not. All right, so if in this example, okay, I have randomly trip another line, which is line 46 to be the third transmission line tripping. All right, so now altogether we have 3 transmission line tripping. All right, so the process continues until, okay, there are 2 conditions where this cascading tripping is halted, that means abruptly stop, is when the first condition is when the whole system collapses. That means all the transmission lines are disconnected. All right. So another one is that there is no more tripping. So let's say, for example, the third transmission line tripping is line 46. So we have exposed line at bus 6 and also bus 4. All right. So if this particular exposed line, after we perform the load flow analysis, the line flow does not violate the thermal limit of the transmission line. So therefore, there is no more line tripping. All right. So if that is the case, that is one of the reason that the static system cascading collapse is halted. That means it is stopped. Right. So another one is if all the system or all the transmission line in the system is disconnected. That means total blackout. All right. So if it is something like this, there is no more transmission line tripping. So that means some part of the system it is still secure. All right. So there will be some power transfer at the part that is still available. All right, so that is the concept of static system cascading collapse. And for dynamic system cascading collapse, okay, so this one I'm using an IEEE 14 bus system to demonstrate the dynamic system cascading collapse, the concept of dynamic. So when we talk about dynamic system cascading collapse, not only involving transmission line, it will also involve the generator tripping. All right, so because when we talk about dynamic and also generator, it depends on the critical clearing time to ensure that the generator is it secure or it has to be outage also. All right, so again, the initial tripping is at line 4, 5. This one is just a case example, and it is not a real situation. Okay, we put it line 4, 5 as the line initial line tripping, the first line to trip. All right, so again, we have to identify the exposed line and also exposed generator. Okay, at these particular buses, bus 4 and also bus 5. Okay, but as you can see here, at bus 4 and bus 5, there is no generator connected to this particular bus, right? So we just look into the exposed line. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 exposed line. All right, so again, we have to perform the power flow solution to look whether this exposed line whether there are the thermal limit has been violated or not. All right. So if the thermal limit is still within the acceptable range of the line, so therefore there is no exposed line that will trip next. Right. So, but if let's say line 4, 3. Okay, so this line 4.3 violates the thermal limit, which is the MVA rating. So this particular line will be the next line to trip. So this is the second transmission line tripping. All right, so and if you see here, this line connected to bus 4 and also bus 3. And at bus number 3, we have a generator. All right, so this particular generator is called the exposed generator, where this generator also will have the probability to trip. All right, so again, the exposed line is the same concept as in static system cascading collapse. All right, so we have to identify whether after power flow solution, we have looked at the thermal limit again. And for the generator, we have to calculate, or we have to identify the critical clearing time. All right, so if the critical clearing time is still within the range, so this generator will still survive. But then if the critical clearing time does not, that means violates the limit, then this particular generator will also be disconnected from bus number 3. That is called the dynamic system cascading collapse. Okay, so the difference between static and also dynamic system cascading collapse is basically static, we only consider transmission line tripping. Else, for dynamic system cascading collapse, it involves also generator tripping. All right, so when we deal with dynamic system cascading collapse, the analysis is a bit tedious, where we have to take into consideration the generator response. Okay, so same as in static system cascading collapse, when we want to know whether the cascaded tripping, whether it has stopped, it is due to the two conditions just now, whether the whole system collapsed, I mean it is a total blackout, or there is no more tripping. Okay, so if there is no more tripping, as we can see here, there are some more line, the original line. So that means the system can still supply the power to a certain load. All right. So the final stage of cascading collapse will also cause the system to split into several small islands. This one has been also explained by Dr. Kanendra just now, right? So it will split the system into a few small islands. All right. So based on these two concept of cascading collapse, okay, I am going to study, or I did study on the risk. What is the risk? The risk, basically, we are going to look into the probability of what is the probability of that particular line and also generator to trip and cause the system to collapse. Okay. All right, so I did mention to you just now regarding the risk assessment that we are going to look into the probability. So I will explain how to calculate or how to model this probability to identify whether this exposed line and also exposed generator. For generator, it is depending on the critical clearing time, but the exposed line is due to the model of probability. Okay, so the probability of exposed line incorrect tripping is due to hidden failure of the protection system. Right, so hidden failure of protection system in the second series of the engineering IEEE PES engineering research discourse, okay, it has been explained by Dr. Lutfi. All right, so for those who missed that part of the explanation, you can have a look back, watch back in the IEEE PES YouTube channel. Okay, so basically in my research, the risk assessment that I'm using, or the model that I'm using, is basically due to the hidden failure of protection system. Okay, so this is the model, okay, that I'm using in this research. So as you can see here, we want to know what is the probability of the exposed line to trip. Okay, and just now I mentioned to you, we want to know whether the exposed line trip or not. It is due to the line flow or the thermal limit. All right, so we have the probability, so we want to know what is the probability against the line flow. All right, so we start, I put initially 8 times 10 to the power of -7 if the line limit is, the line flow is less or equal to the line limit. That means the line is, the probability of that particular exposed line to trip is very, very small. All right, so how I got this value, okay, I'll explain to you later. So the model will increase, okay, as the line limit increases. So the probability of that particular exposed line to trip depending on the value of the line flow. Okay, if that particular exposed line, the line flow increases against line limit, the probability will increase also. Okay, it follows the linear pattern here. And if the line flow reaches to 1.4 of the line limit, okay, the probability of that particular line, exposed line to trip is 1.0. That means for sure it will trip, right? So if it is, the line flow is greater than 1.4 times the line limit, then the probability of that particular exposed line to trip is also 1.0. All right, so this model has been used by quite a number of researchers, okay, to model the hidden failure of the protection system. All right, so this is the formula to calculate the probability of hidden failure. Right, so it depends on the number of events for system cascading collapse, which is the ECC, divide by TCC is the total years of observation. All right, so let's say ECC is 10 year, the duration for that ECC we capture for 10 years. That means the value of TCC is 10 years. The probability of hidden failure here is we want to calculate what is the probability for an event, for a cascading collapse to occur in 1 second. So that is why we times 360, which is year, hours, minutes, and also second. Okay, so this is also used by researchers to model the hidden failure of a protection system. Okay. So by referring to the NERC report, okay, ECC equals to 400 events of cascading collapse that happened in the past 16 years, 1984 to 1999, okay, are caused by hidden failure of a protective relay. So therefore, this implies that the probability for such occurrence is small, but it is not negligible, okay, as attached below. So therefore, the probability of one cascading collapse event can be calculated. Okay, you apply this formula, okay, plug in the value, which is ECC equals to 400 events, and the observation years is 16 years. All right, so we get the value of 8 times 10 to the power of negative 7 event per second. Okay, as we can see here, the value of probability for an event of cascading collapse to happen is very, very small, 8 times 10 to the power of negative 7. But we cannot ignore or neglect it, as the consequences of this probability could make or could cause catastrophic events due to this cascading events. So the system might collapse due to this very small number of probability of hidden failure. So this is how I model the exposed line tripping, the probability of each particular exposed line to trip, right? So if it is 1, the exposed line will surely trip. Okay, so next is due to, this research is basically due to deregulation of utilities. All right, so normally, or the traditional utilities, it is just a straightforward system where from the power plant, the local electric company will manage all the activities related to selling and buying of electrical energy to the consumer. But in terms of deregulation, we have competitors. Okay, so from the power plant, it will be supplied by different supplier, okay, electric supplier. So the utility only manage on the transmission and also the distribution. Okay, but the consumer can select which supplier they want to buy, or they want the supplier to supply to their for the electric the electricity. So this is as before, it is called monopoly by only one utility, but then for deregulated power system, it is open market. Okay, so of course, when we have open market, the consumer will go for in terms of reliability and also in terms of cost. Okay, so that is one of the reason also of this study. All right, so I will share what I have done in this research on risk assessment and also the reliability. Okay, the first one is I'll just read through the problem statement. Okay, in a certain condition, the disturbance occurred in a power system cannot be mitigated, right? So, and eventually causing to a major service interruption or cascading collapse. All right, so due to this condition, okay, since we cannot mitigate the event or the occurrence of the interruption, So we propose to model and analyze a framework of risk assessment for both static and also dynamic system cascading collapse, incorporating with the effect of protection system hidden failure. Okay, so this protection system hidden failure is by the model of to identify the probability of exposed line, right? Right. So basically, what I did here is that um, we there are two case study here. Um, Actually, we perform the activity of cascading collapse. That means we force the system to collapse by two conditions. Which the first one is by transmission line tripping. So that means we test for each one of the line tripping and to get what is the value of the probability of the whole system to collapse due to that particular initial line tripping. Okay, and another situation that I did was to increase the total loading condition of the system where I'm making the system to be at stress, and finally it will collapse. And for this case, I would like to see at which level of total loading condition that is the most severe of cascading collapse. Okay. And from that, I also calculated or model to find what is the available power transfer due to this cascading collapse. Okay, just now, if you can remember, I mentioned that the system or the cascading collapse can be stopped by two conditions: whether the whole system collapse, that means there is no more power transfer, that one is total blackout, or if there is no more exposed line or exposed generator tripping, okay, there are still parts of the system that could supply power. All right, so we want to know what is the amount of power that can be transferred within the what we call call it as partial collapse. All right, so the test system that I'm using in this study is IEEE Reliability Test System 1979. Okay, it consists of 38 transmission lines. Okay, so for this study, I tried or I performed the tripping one by one from line number 1 until line number 38. So I tabulated the probability of the system to collapse for due to that particular line tripping. So I have the list or I have the results for all the 38 transmission line to be the initial tripping. Okay, another system that I'm using is a much more bigger system, which is the IEEE Reliability Test System 1996. All right, so for this system, it has 120 interconnected transmission line. Again, for this system also, I've tested for each of the transmission line, okay, for the all 120 transmission line as the initial tripping. And also I collect the data or the results for probability of the system to collapse due to all the 120 lines as the initial tripping. Okay, so I'm using two different types of system. All right, so this is the results that I have gathered for the sensitive transmission line. All right, so this is due to static system cascading collapse only for the transmission line tripping. Okay, so I have tested, this is for 1979 test system, which has 38 transmission lines. So for in the table, I've tabulated three different values of the hidden failure probability. So as you can see in the middle is due to the probability that we have calculated based on the NERC report, which is 8 times 10 to the power of negative 7. Okay, and on the left hand side, I have selected a lower value of PHF as compared to the from the NERC report, and on the right hand side is a higher value of PHF. Okay, from here we just want to look to monitor what are the difference effect of the probability of the system to collapse if the value of PHF is different. Okay, so out for 79 bus system out of 38 transmission line, I have selected seven highest value of the probability. So this is the probability calculated based on the initial tripping of, let's say, bus line at bus 12 and bus 13. All right, so the probability for the system to collapse is 0.3554. All right, so the middle results is for 8 times 10 to the power of negative 7, which contributes to the same transmission line with the highest value of probability, which is 0.3558. And also for a a higher value of PHF, once again, the initial line tripping of 1213 contributes to highest value of probability for the system to collapse. Right. So from here we can see, or we can identify which is the most severe line, or we can call it as sensitive line. That means if that particular line trips, therefore it contributes to higher value of probability for the system to collapse. All right. So that means the utility, or the planning side of the utility has to make sure that when it observes the transmission line, it has to know which line is the most sensitive due to cascading collapse. All right, so this one is for still sensitive transmission line, where we perform initial line tripping for all the 120 transmission line for IEEE RTS 96. This one is also static system cascading collapse, where we only perform the tripping of exposed line, transmission line. Right, so for here we can see that the most severe or the sensitive lines is the line connected to bus 318 to 223. All right, so but for PHF with a higher value, the highest or the sensitive transmission line is line 112 and also 112 to 113. All right, so as you can compare between the previous results, this one is for IEEE Reliability Test System 79. The value of the probability is quite big, 0.355 something. Okay, as compared to IEEE 96 bus system, the values of probability for the system to collapse is quite small, 0.08 something. So you can see that here, if for a larger system, the system is much more stable as compared to a smaller system. So we can see here, it is proven that the probability is smaller. All right, so the graph reflects the results, where we can see graphically where are the sensitive transmission lines due to static system cascading collapse. All right, so this one is the results for severe loading condition. Okay, I mentioned to you the second case is that we increase the total loading condition in the system to study what is the impact of the loading adjustment to the severity of the system to collapse. All right, so this one is also tested by using the static system cascading collapse for IEEE RTS 79. Okay, so the total loading condition started at 150% increment, because for IEEE Reliability Test System 79, the system will only become unstable if we increase 150% above. So if below 150%, there will be no events of cascading collapse. That means the system can still withstand load up to 140%. Right. So these are the results. Okay, I also use 3 different case study of the hidden failure. 8 times 10 to the power of negative 7. It depends. It is according to the NERC, and one value lower and one value higher. So we can have a look at the probability of the system to collapse if we increase the total loading condition, right? So okay, this is the graphical representation of the results tabulated in the table. All right, so next is the still severe loading condition, but this one is for 96 bus system. Okay, we still use the model for static system cascading collapse, but for 96 bus system, the system starts to become unstable if we increase the total loading condition 130 and above. Right, so below 130, the system is still stable. Right, so again, these are the results for 3 different case study of the hidden failure probability. So the graph reflects the results from the table. All right, next is the power transfer for the system when we perform the static system cascading collapse. All right, so that means for this case, the system is not totally collapsed. Okay, it is partially collapsed, where there are still some power that can be transferred in the system. All right, so the blue color is the original load pattern, load value for 1 day, and the yellow color graph is due to the static system cascading collapse. We can see the difference between the original and also due to cascading collapse. It is 187.79 compared to original is 200 and something, 206.78. All right, so and also we can calculate what is the margin for that transmission TRM. TRM is the transmission reliability margin, okay, due to cascading collapse. Okay, so the margin is 18.99. All right, so for RTS, IEEE RTS 79, okay, so we divided it to 6 areas. Okay, actually, 3 areas, but the configuration is from the power transfer is from area 1 to area 2. Okay, and the other way, area 2 to area 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 1, 2 to 3, and 3 to 1. Okay, so we can have a look what is the TRM and also what is the power transfer from that particular area due to static system cascading collapse. All right, this one is for TRM and also ATC, the power transfer due to, again, static system cascading collapse, but for 96 bus system, right? All right, so this is the comparative results of the transmission reliability margin, but for this one, okay, I'm considering 3 types of uncertainty: the chronological hourly peak loads, transmission line outages is only 1 line. Okay, for static system cascading collapse, we initially trip 1 line and then we perform the cascading collapse until the system halted. All right, so from these 3, okay, basically the 2 uncertainties is basically from the past researcher. So I combine this one, I can get what is the combined uncertainty for the TRM. Okay, and also from the value of the available power transfer and also the transmission reliability margin, we can predict it to the next day load. All right, so based on the same uncertainty. All right, so this one is for system RTS 1996. And all right, so that one is for static system cascading collapse. Now is the results of when we perform the dynamic system cascading collapse. All right, so the dynamic, again, it has to model the system cascading collapse, has to take into consideration the generator response. All right, so basically these results tabulated when we perform the dynamic system cascading collapse by testing or by initial tripping for each of the transmission line. And then we perform the dynamic where we have to calculate first the critical clearing time for that particular generator. All right, so basically for dynamic system cascading collapse, these are the results for IEEE 79 bus system, where as you can see here, when we perform the dynamic system cascading collapse, the highest value of lines differs from the previous static system cascading collapse. Right, so from the dynamic system cascading collapse, from the graph, we can identify which is the most sensitive transmission lines due to that particular analysis. All right, so this one is also dynamic system cascading collapse. We are going to look which transmission line is the most sensitive. And this one is for IEEE Reliability Test System 96. Okay, so this one is for severe loading condition. Again, we increase the load for the system, but we perform the dynamic system cascading collapse where we consider the generator tripping. Okay, this one is for 79 bus system. All right, the next one is severe loading condition. Okay, but considering dynamic system cascading collapse for IEEE Reliability System 96, which is the biggest system. Okay, we can have a look at the pattern of the probability of the system if we increase the total loading condition. All right, so again, this is the TRM and also the ATC value for the power transfer by considering the dynamic system cascading collapse. Okay, so that one for 79 bus system, but this one is for 96 bus system. All right, so this is the comparative results for the TRM and also ATC for by considering all the three uncertainties. Okay, both for 79 bus system and also 96 bus system. All right, so basically from the first research, what I could say is that it is very important to select the accurate hidden failure probability, okay, as it could affect the value of the sensitive transmission lines and also the severity of the total loading condition. All right, so from the graph just now, you can see clearly what happened or which line or which the total loading condition if the value of PHF is different. Okay, so again, the PHF value here, it depends on the number of events of the cascading collapse in 1 second. All right, so it is very important to use accurate data for that hidden failure probability. And also, we can also calculate or identify what is the transfer capability, which is TRM, and also ATC with different types of uncertainties. All right, so move on into research number 2. So basically, this study, we consider that most of the studies to explore and analyze enormous losses due to system cascading collapse to the society and economy consider only the static characteristics of power system and lack of consideration in terms of generating unit dynamic response, which is the generator response. All right, so for that, we propose, what we did was to perform the reliability cost-worth analysis so that the severity of power system condition could be assessed by means of interruption cost, okay, experienced by the customer, which is the CIC, incurred due to the occurrence of static and also dynamic system cascading collapse. So what we did was we calculated the CIC. Okay, we resemble the reliability of a power system in terms of the cost. Okay, we consider both static and also dynamic system cascading collapse and also the sensitive transmission lines and severity of the total loading condition. and also evaluated mainly on the risk based and reliability cost worth. So a quick one for the results of the risk and also reliability cost worth. All right, so this is based on static system cascading collapse that we have performed previously in the first research. Okay, if we increase the load, okay, the value of the probability is from the previous research, and we calculate what is the average customer interruption cost. Okay, what customer interruption cost is basically the cost that the customer basically is the monetary cost, okay, that the customer need to bear due to the power interruption. All right, so as you can see here from the graph, as we increase the load, okay, the pattern of the cost follows the pattern of the probability. So the if the probability is high, of course the cost will also high. All right, so this one is for dynamic system cascading collapse. Okay, the method is more or less the same, but we calculated for the CIC. All right, so this one is for the static system cascading collapse by taking into consideration the initial line tripping. So we can also calculate what is the customer interruption cost. All right, so for this case study, I'm using just one value of PHF, and there are one of my students did a comparison between other value of PHF. All right, so this one is for dynamic system cascading collapse for 79 bar system. Basically, these are all just case study for the static and also dynamic system cascading collapse. So we can have a look also at the customer interruption cost. All right, so this one is dynamic system cascading collapse with total loading condition increase for IEEE 1996. All right, so this is static system cascading collapse with sensitive transmission line for 96 bus system. All right, so because I have two sets of system, that is why the results is quite a lot. So this one is for dynamic system cascading collapse with sensitive transmission line for RTS 96. All right, so basically for research number 2, what we did was to determine the risk and also the customer interruption cost utilized for reliability assessment, okay, of a power system attributed by the impact of static and also dynamic system cascading collapse. All right, so the implication is still the same. It's due to the hidden failure of protection system. All right. Okay, so as a conclusion to my presentation, right, so basically the research has successfully achieved all the objective that we propose, which include the design new approach for risk and reliability cost worth assessment, which are basically used to analyze the impact of cascading collapse for both static and also dynamic system cascading collapse with consideration of hidden failure in protection system. All right. So prelude study has been carried out by developing a new framework of power system risk assessment in relation to the impact of system cascading collapse. Right. So a statistical analysis of power system collapse profile reported by the NERC report revealed that most of the interruptions were caused by the misoperation of protection system, which is the hidden failure. Okay, so hidden failure is the main reason causing to the misoperation of protection system, and this matter has been taken into account in the risk assessment of power system cascading collapse. So therefore, realistic selection of hidden failure is important for obtaining a better results of system cascading collapse. All right, okay. To know more on my research, you can scan to this QR code, and it will be directed to the list of publications that I have published related to this subject matter. All right, so I guess with that, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Professor II Dr. Ashida Salim, for the informative sharing. On behalf of this organizing committee, I would like to thank technologist Dr. Kanendra Naidu and Associate Professor II Dr. Ashida Salim for the very informative talk. I believe all of us understand the main points from the talk just now. Now I will proceed with the Q&A session. I will read the question from Mr. Abdul Malik. For the first speaker, how is A and N used for the LFC problem?
Okay, all right. So thank you, Ashikin, all right, and thank you, Encik Abdul Malik for the question. So, how is ANN used for the LFC problem? So, for neural network, if you want to use it for the LFC problem, what we need to do is we need to generate training data. So, how we can actually generate training data is we subject the LFC to various conditions or various step load perturbation. So once there is different step load perturbation and different controller action, then we are able to obtain sufficient training data. So once we have trained the ANN module, then we can actually implement an ANN based PID controller, for example, if you're using PID or if you're using neurofuzzy, ANN and fuzzy logic, and then you can implement this controller, and it will work based on how well you have trained the system. So it always comes back to how you train the system. If we do not give sufficient training data, then the performance might not be good. So if you give diverse training data, then the performance would be good. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Okay, for the second question is from Mr. Ahmad Farid. Do the generator outages can be considered as part of cascading collapse?
Okay, I think that's for me. All right, sure, Dr. Ahmad Farid, I have explained just now. It is considered as the dynamic system cascading collapse, where we consider the transmission line tripping and also the generator tripping. Okay, and for the generator tripping, it has to be perform by calculating the critical clearing time of that generator in order for the analysis to identify whether that particular generator trips or not. All right, I think that answers that question.
Okay, we have the third question from Mr. Hazli. This is for Dr. Kanendra. Besides using different types of controllers, what are other potential research areas for LFC for more than two area systems?
Okay, so I think this is by Prof. Azli. So thanks a lot, Prof. Azli. And also I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Prof. Azli for inviting for this particular research discourse. So in this LFC research, as has been mentioned, so there is, we can use different type of controllers. So other than just using different type of controllers for the load frequency problem, we can actually investigate different optimization techniques, the newer optimization techniques, and not only just on the optimization technique, but also the performance of the technique, because we can actually investigate on parallel computing. So that is one part of the research which is going on, where we are actually investigating how we can enhance the performance and time, especially for large cases of LFC, because one of the reason most of the literature has limited the areas in LFC is because you need a lot of processing power. So with now we have computers which are able to process huge volume of data, then we can use larger areas, and also we can use capability of parallel processing to do this, and also not only limited to the modeling, how we model the system. So we can also move from a transfer function model to perhaps a real physical model. So those are areas, and also for hardware integration, where we're actually considering hardware in loop. So we can have a simple setup. Obviously, RTDS would be good, but if not, in lab-based environment, we can have a generator and we can actually have a controller and we can actually see how it performs in real-world scenario, these controllers, these intelligent controllers. Yeah, thank you.
The next question is from Mr. Monash. The question to the first speaker: if there are multiple SLPS, how can the optimization process overcome this?
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Manoj. I think interesting question. So, if you have multiple SLP, multiple step load contribution, how does optimization does this? Because the SLPs can be different. In one area is maybe 50 megawatt, another one be 80 megawatt. So the method that we have used is we have done simultaneous optimization. So basically, we put in all the step load contribution and we treat it at one go in simultaneous optimization. But when it comes to the parameter, the controller parameter, we do not treat it the same. We have different parameters. So for each area, it will optimize by itself, but at the same time. So that's how we address this problem with multiple SLPs. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Mr. Baba, and the questions to the first speaker: how is LSC modeling for ICI?
Okay, so thank you for this question. So for LFC modeling for ICI or control islanding, um, first of all, we need to let's say, for example, in the example that we have done 39 bars, we have 30 bars, 39 bars, or 118 bars. So we need to model that 119, 118 or 39 bars in terms of transfer function, right? So we have done like three areas with three generators, so we have to extend the model. So once we have extended the model, then we have to put in disconnecting switches in certain parts of the system where the tie lines are or where the interconnection lines are. So the moment we want to simulate ICI, we can disconnect the switches and then we separate the complete model into several areas. So that's how we can use transfer function modeling for LFC for ICI problem. Thanks.
Again, question from Prof. Hazli to Dr. Ashida. How does renewable energies impact the reliability analysis?
Okay, for that one, I have yet to study on the impact of renewable energies, but I believe that the if we have more, a few sets of renewable energy to support the existing generator in the system, okay, it would contribute to a better or the improvement of the reliability analysis. Okay, maybe I can further enhance the research to these renewable energies. Thank you, Prof. Azli.
We go to the next question from Ms. Aya Nuril to Dr. Nurashida. After knowing which buses have the higher or highest probability of cascading collapse, what is or are the proposed mitigation actions that the utility provider shall take?
Okay, so basically, what we have understood from the concept of cascading collapse is that there is an initial tripping of one particular line that could contribute to the tripping of subsequent transmission lines. Okay, on the utility, what utility can do is basically they can monitor these particular sensitive lines so that it will not the process of cascading collapse will be prevented or can be stopped before further into more line tripping. I guess that one utility can has the they are capable of monitoring this transmission line status. So if the utility knows that, let's say line 1, 2 trip, so I mean, from this study, it should know what is the next line to trip, so that um, it is the prevention lah, which is the mitigation for on the utility part, right? So this to me, the study of cascading collapse is important for the utility to identify if, let's say, one transmission line trips. So which are the next line to trip? Therefore, they can have a preventive action earlier lah, before the line collapse or the total blackout. Thank you, IR Nuril.
Okay, this is the link to the first question from IR Nuril. Based on the results, how serious is the probability for the buses or the substation to collapse that the utility provider should do, or as a preventive maintenance?
I guess it is more or less the same as what I have answered just now. If they know what the unstable lines, right? So this unstable line will contribute to the tripping. So of course, the bus and also the substation will also be affected. All right. So I believe because I don't have experience looking into the utility side, but I believe that utility has the system to monitor all the status of the equipment or the assets of the utility. Okay, I hope that answers IR Nuril's question.
Okay, we will go to the next question from Mr. Monash to Dr. Kanendra. That Mr. Monash interested to know more about the application of your works on EV charging optimization. Perhaps that you guys could discuss this later date. Thank you and have a great day.
Right. Okay. Thanks for the question, to Mr. Manoj. So currently, for EV charging optimization, I think I've been working for the past 2 or 3 years, but it's with the research project team with the verticals team in Taylor's University. So we are working with them, and I've been looking into the optimization process. So currently, we are modeling based on the real hardware, and we have initially done uh, PI controller, optimized PI controller based on ITAE function, which I explained earlier. So our next step is currently we are optimizing the controller using PSO and also genetic algorithm, and the next step is for us to deploy into the controller, the TM controller card, which is a DSP, and then we can verify the results and compare with the conventional tuning, and how it improves the system performance. The previous one that we did, there was improve in system performance, but that was just a normal optimization. But now we are going into swarm intelligence based optimization, and I believe it should be giving better results. Definitely, we can discuss this offline regarding this to Mr. Manish. Thank you.
The next question is from Dr. Ahmad Farid. Is there any risk assessment study focusing on distribution system?
Okay. At the moment, from the research, literature research that I have conducted, okay, there are a study on this risk assessment on the distribution side. However, my personal research, I have yet to study on this distribution side. Okay, my focus is on the transmission and also the generation, right? But maybe we can have a look at, because we know that power system consists of generation, transmission, and distribution. Of course, all parts of the power system, they have their own risk. Okay, so we can have a look at the risk assessment on the distribution side also. Okay.
Alright, I think that is the last question. Once again, I would like to thank Associate Professor IR Dr. Ashida Salim and Technologist Dr. Kanendra Naidu for answering the questions from the participants. With that, we have come to end of the program. I hope all of you could support all of our upcoming events. Please follow the IEEE PES Malaysia Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel. With that, thank you so much everyone. Stay safe and Assalamualaikum. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
Shikin.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Dr. Kanendra.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr.
Kanendra and
Ashida.
Dr.
Thank you,
Nurashida.
Ms. Ashikin.
Bye.